Alright, draft science video. Yes, I know I have to continue my overview of the re-explanation of physics. But I'll do some of this responding stuff just because it's all related and I can make subtle points here and there. And I'm just really busy. So I just haven't had time to do the pencil and paper thing. Holiday has posted a couple of videos, and there's a couple of comments in here bringing up other experiments, and other things that bring up the idea of quantum. Still, we don't know exactly what quantum mechanics is, right? I mean, quantum mechanics, in my opinion, is just recognition that the exchange of energy between photons and electrons primarily takes place within rules that are probabilistic, that there is a kind of level, much like the structure of the atom itself being dependent on certain energy levels. There's stages to function. There's say a gap. Say you have a circle and it's spinning, and the circle has 10% of the circle as an opening. That circumstance would then create a probability that if you interact with this circle, there's a 20% probability that you'll interact within 1/4 of that opening. Say the opening creates a difference in how the thing will function. There might be a 10% or a 5% chance that you'll actually hit the opening itself. So I'm just saying that it's the structure, the fact that if a circle's in an ellipse, it changes based on, there's fundamental differences, but those differences are only for short periods of time based on the cycling effect. So if you cycle something that's not a round circle but an oval circle, and you cycle it, what's your odds of hitting what part of the sides of that mechanism? Because you not only have to get through the thing itself, you might hit the actual pedestal, the actual point, or if you got through the gap, there'd be a timing differential between where you're going to likely get swiped or hit as the thing swings by, and there'd be a very low probability that you get all the way through. So these are all filters, as I keep using this word filter, but these are all filtering mechanisms, and the classic interference wave pattern is just a filter pattern. It's the pattern of what you would acknowledge you would get in a filtered result. So to take these in some kind of order, right, the first point somebody brought up was that they have done this with atoms. Now I can't get, somebody can post a link to the actual source material, like some kind of PDF that actually shows me what this device looks like. I got a little tiny image of it, but that's all I've been able to find, to see how the experiment was done, because they call things two-slit experiments. Really aren't two-slit experiments. And I would, besides, I'd say fine. I mean, that's great if they've done it, but they haven't done it the way this man described it. So I'm just saying he described a two-slit experiment with atoms that wasn't the two-slit experiment, I'm sure, that has been done with atoms. So that's my first critique, and my critique holds in the sense that the experiment with the detector unplugged, no one's stupid enough to unplug a detector and say this means something. It's like having an unplugged toaster next to the experiment. Who cares? If you've unplugged it, it doesn't exist, right? I mean, let's just presume the detector does something when it's detecting, and once you've turned it off, it doesn't do anything. So it's like having nothing in the experiment. A rabbit. A puppy. What's the point of talking about? I mean, I'm just saying, my critique holds that his description of this experiment, as he described it, did not take place. That's the argument. That it's completely, substantially a fairy tale. The fact that Goldilocks was a little girl, a real girl, doesn't change the fact that the entire story is shit. Anyway. Alright, what I was able to find, I'll show some of that. like I said, they want $35. I'm not paying them $35 for the article. So, but this is the contraption here that's shooting the little bits of glue, carbon. I would imagine this is a detector over here. I just can't tell. But the whole point would be is that you should be able to detect atoms without disturbing them too much. And the atoms presumably are moving much slower than photons or electrons. So you almost should be able to see their entire path. So we should be able to answer these questions about wave duality, going through both slits, all this other crapola. So the point is yes, if they can do this experiment and they can actually get this result in a legitimate manner, which I'm not sure they've done here at all, great. Let's do it. You know, answer these questions once and for all, because I don't think the answer is going to be that the piece of carbon went through both slits. And I'm sure it's not going to be that the piece of carbon has some sort of wave field thingy that just goes forever and something, and it goes through both slits evenly, and then the carbon blob that we know is a blob of carbon atoms somehow rides on this field. I mean, I just think it's an absolutely preposterous theory. So I think it'll be demonstrated to be absolutely preposterous. So, you know, but I'm just not sure about. Like I said, we haven't diagnosed, in my opinion, no one's rationally or thoroughly diagnosed the two-slit experiment, and yet I'm supposed to now diagnose a very complex atom shooter. So anyway, so there's another picture of. They have different pictures of the results. So one set of results shows it on a grid that is magnetized, which I don't know. That seems to me right there that you're in trouble. You know, that you're asking for a result. But this is the classic. This is, it seems every time somebody does this experiment in a new or different way, this is all you get. Is this. Okay, you get these images. Now, my first critique is this image is not half as intense as this image. This looks much more than twice as strong as this. And then if you do detail, I don't know how much detail you can see here, but if you do detail this single slit example, you can clearly see the beginnings of the formation of fringes throughout this whole thing. There's blobs right in there, just as almost not as clear as these blobs, but clearly representative of these blobs. So, you know, what's the theory? That the photon went through one slit and interfered with itself? I'm just saying that this is an indication that the material that the photon is passing through or by is part of the creation of this phenomenon. And that part of the creation may even be in the source. Again, we never get to see an image of what the light looked like before it went in. Before it gets to those two slits, they should put a detector right at the two slits and let us see exactly what you're sending through the slits before you send it through the slits. That seems to me to be the deductively, you know, if you're going to sit there and legitimize an experiment, it seems that's one of the ways you legitimize it. I mean, the only PDF I was able to get was a PDF about what they bought and where they bought it. You know, what materials where they purchased their materials. Well, I'd rather see something a little more relevant to the experiment. But anyway, I'm sorry, but it really is annoying that scientists don't have some way to communicate their science on the internet in some manner other than for pay-per-view manner. I mean, it's pretty disgusting to be doing science pay-per-view. You know, I mean, shit. I'm sorry, but that's just bullshit. Sorry. You know, I don't think you should be called a scientist. You should be called some sort of kappa-scientist or something, or kep-scientist, or kepsicist. But you're not a fucking scientist if you think pay-per-view is the way you should be publishing in 2015. So that's my critique of that shit. Oh, well then, if you the writing is just preposterous. I should read some of this shit. the beautiful experiment. The experiment was first carried out in the early 1800s. The English scientist Thomas Young effort to blah 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 blah. Young's beam blah blah blah, and then it goes on about now what they've proved. The double slit experiment upturned physics again in 1961 when German physicist Johansen showed that when electrons pass through this, it produces the same pattern. Result was shocking because the electrons are individual particles and they're thought to be produced by a pattern after all. And then it says, it gets in here like this, they have proven it. They have disproven the particle theory. I mean, it's just this exaggerated language that's just totally inappropriate for what are called scientists based on this quality of evidence. This is not proof. Okay, it's just not. This is something to think about and to talk about. This isn't goddamn proof of anything. So anyway, really annoying. So anyway, so this other guy posted to this homemade eraser experiment. So I'll talk about that now. So yeah, I'm all good on the, yes, shoot as many atoms as you possibly can through these experiments, because I think the bigger you get and the more detectable they are, the more you're going to find out this has nothing to do with any quantum crap. Anyway, any mystical, unrecognized force fields of whatever. They're regular force fields that we already know about, which are called static electricity. Anyway, so this other guy brought up the erasure experiment, and so he posted a link to this awesome homemade thingy, blah blah blah. And it's not, I didn't watch the whole video, but it's just, I think it's just the polarization thing. So again, this gimmick of polarization is again just kind of a gimmick, okay? Because what's happening in polarization is when light goes through this polarization. So think about it as a jail cell. You know, it's just bars, and light can be in any configuration. And what's happening is when it goes through the bars, it's being forced to become polarized in one direction. And but it can be in any, it can be anywhere from 45-degree angle to the 90-degree angle and get through the bars. But once it goes through the bars, it's at a 90-degree angle. So it's changed by the filters. So there's no erasure in the sense that, no, you've already changed the substance, and now any further filtering you do will be on a quantity that's now already been filtered. So erasure is just basically is this idea that you take the two polarized films, one going 90 degrees, one going 90 degrees perpendicular to each other, and that blacks out all light. And if you stick another film in between at 45-degree angle, that now the light will pass through. And it's only doing that because now you're allowing it to be bent 45 degrees at a time. So each filter is allowed to bend at 45 degrees at its maximum. So you can have one filter, it starts off at 90, the first filter bends it to 45, and then the second filter can bend it to 90, the other perpendicular direction. So there's no eraser effect here at all. This is, it's changing. The filter isn't detecting, it's changing. Alright, so I don't really want to get into that. I mean, you know, this just gets very complicated when everybody's bringing up all these different experiments. Okay, so Holiday brought up a Susskind video where he's talking about the spin of electrons, the up-down thing, and the fact that there's a certain energy level required to go up or down. But again, this is another thing that can be explained by saying that we don't get to see exactly what is residue in these interactions between photons and electrons. So it's it's just back to the 90-45 thing again, is that something can be in some other position and it'll be cleaned to a 90. All right, so the fact that you need a certain amount of energy to get to a certain point is the wrong way to put it. The changes will always be to a rounded position. So again, the bars will force rounding to this position, and the same thing's happening with electrons. They don't go extra distance around. So if you put in a certain amount of energy, they go to the 90 and they'll get rid of whatever extra you give them. So if there are 10, they'll just go 10. Even though you put in 70, they'll go 10, and whatever extra there is going to get disposed of somewhere. So it's just a rounding thing. So all the electrons that are in some state above that 50% level will round to the 90, and the others below it will round to the 0. So it's that kind of thing. No, I don't want to, like I said, I don't really want to get into that. So the other guy brought up neon gas or something, and some other effect, and it's a little, not to concede that there's a lot of interaction going on inside of a whole pool of gas, and that it's perfectly reasonable to suspect that there's interactions you're not seeing that are creating extra bits of different kinds of energy within the gas itself. So it's much like I could shine infrared light on a blob of substance, that the substance would convert that light into ultraviolet light internally, and that ultraviolet photons would be traveling internally through the substance. I mean, clearly what's happening when anything's getting energized by any kind of energy is that a lot of photons are released by the electrons, and those are photons of different energy levels. And so even though you don't see the light, it's in there. Much of what electricity is doing may not be electrons moving as much as it may be just a conveyance of photons from one electron to another electron. Especially, I think, when you get to the point where you're moving electricity very fast through a conductor, it may be moving as photons, not electrons. You don't see them because they're moving. You wouldn't see a laser beam if it wasn't interacting with atmosphere and creating scattering. So it's only when you have scattering that you'll see light. You don't see light when it's on a mission, so to speak, and it's uninterrupted in doing that. Alright, so that's another point. No point in getting to. And what was the last one? Was some other one. Well, anyway, there's no point in going through all of these. I mean, I do like these different experiments. I like the Newton glass experiment. Okay, I think that's one that deserves some talking about, because I think that one's one where we can start to understand that, yeah, photons aren't doing the work. The glass is doing the work. The glass changes. As you change the thickness of the glass, you change the character of the surface of the glass, because the molecules are in a different position. So if I compress something, not even compress it, if I give it less space to live in, it's going to arrange itself differently. So you can think of like a box that only holds 2 balls, right? So let's call it a horizontal box, but it has the height of 2 exactly. The 2 balls can fit exactly. Well, if I change that height, the 2 balls will have to line up diagonally. They can't line up perpendicularly anymore. They have to change their position, their orientation. And that's what's happening with glass when you change its thickness. You're changing the arrangement of the molecules within it. You're changing how they're aligned with each other. And we know that glass is highly aligned. The molecules aren't just randomly moving. That's why glass is transparent, is because it has a consistent matrix that stuff can go through. Alright. So now, there's some Pyrrho and Hothele comments here, which is good. And they're arguing a little with each other, which is good. Do I want to get to the Feynman? Yeah, the Feynman, the last video Hothele posted, I just thought I would make one comment on that, because it's a little bit, it's kind of a good point. I mean, I'm really starting to hate this Sean Carroll guy. So I did send him a PM, just for the hell of it. And no response, of course. But yeah, he's really obnoxious in saying that he knows this shit. He knows what magnetism is, he knows what this is, and he's doing this whole field theory shit like it's been proven. And again, he hasn't proven anything, and he certainly hasn't proven the mechanism. So it just, and again, I'm going to argue that I think I can make a good argument for the fact that magnetism and gravity are created by real pressure, not field pressure, but real photons that exist in the real universe and exert real physical changes on matter and change their orientation. They physically interfere with it. Okay, they're not absorbed as energy, but they change the disposition of the matter itself. So magnets attract to each other because their acceleration is changed. They are essentially accelerated by changing their orientation, their shape. And so we're back to my school of fish argument and all that, but I think these are really valid arguments. And I should maybe just stick to that because that explains it. It does. So photons that have a wavelength have energy. Photons that don't have a wavelength, that are by themselves, unassociated photons, they have a influence, a capacity to influence, but they have no, they can't release their energy because it can't be absorbed. I guess that might be a good argument to make. That they can't have an energetic effect because they can't be absorbed without releasing them. It's the conservation of energy thing. We're back to that. I mean, the only thing that has energy in the universe are photons. Photons moving the speed of light. That's the source of all energy, all movement, all everything. And it's just changing, like the school of fish. You have to change the direction. That's all you can do is change direction. But changing direction doesn't require any energy. It just requires interaction. So there's interactions that take place between fish, let's say. Say if you have pool balls, and those pool balls have a static speed. They can't change their speed. Then any interaction between the pool balls will have no transfer of energy. They'll just change each other's direction. And that's all that's happening when we're accelerated by gravity. We're accelerated. It's like pushing something in space. It's just accelerated. Once it has acceleration, that's a change in its shape, and that's why it keeps moving. It's because it keeps eating space. Its molecular structure, it's like that circle where you just bite off that one more piece each time, and then the circle will move. So all the circle has to do is take a little tiny bite of. So if you think of the circle as a coiled spring, or even just if you understand it as just having a slight overlap, it's always going to be eating space in some direction. If you think of space like not a solid, but as something where it's like a checkerboard. It has a substance, but it doesn't have much to do with the board, the movement of the players, beyond the fact that it's the rules that the players move on. It's the board. So space is eaten when you move a space. You're not going to get that. Yeah, I'm already way too much of a physicist for you people. Yeah, you're just not going to understand the things I already understand. So anyway, so now I think we can get to the holiday stuff. Yeah, I didn't read the comments in this video. What video is this? Oh, okay, that's the Sean. Okay, that's Hoffman's video. But anyway, and so then Feynman was making the argument. He was trying to explain magnetism, and explain that we just don't know enough about this thing, and you can only go with some analogy that we have analogies for, and we don't have analogies for these things. But I think we do have them. We just haven't had a refined or detailed enough model. So the model that physicists are relying on is this ambiguous. This is associated to this mathematically. This is associated to that mathematically. It doesn't have any shape. Okay, it doesn't have a bowling alley. It doesn't have a bowling ball. It doesn't have a wooden floor. I mean, their model of reality is not at all coherent or recognizable to somebody saying, "Show me the mechanical parts." Because it doesn't have mechanical parts. All right. So right, half of day. This is on my video. A little extra add-on. Feynman, I believe, wrote a paper explaining why Dr. Quantum version could not be done due to too heavy an influence upon passing particles. I don't know exactly what that means, but obviously detectors have already, it's a classic known that the detector is a problem. Okay, you turn the detector on, it's going to have, to detect the particle, whether it's an electron or a photon, you have to substantially change the atmosphere that the electron's traveling through. There's no way to do it in some subtle, you can't stroke an electron, you can't touch it, you can't do anything like that. And the same with photons, you just can't play with them. Alright, you either interact with them aggressively or you don't. But there's no way to just say, I know you went by, without there being a transfer of energy. And photons can't transfer energy except completely. That's the whole point. They're particles, idiots. Anyway, I have looked and I'm starting to think you're right. The oft-touted experiment has not been done. Well, I'm pretty damn sure it hasn't been done, because there would be an example of it somewhere if it was, and there isn't any. So now Pyrrho has to chime in. The experiment and uncounted variations have been carried out. What do you mean? Question mark. See again. So uncounted variations, unreported, unaccountable variations, I think is a better way to put it. Unaccountable variations. That's right, because there's absolutely no detail to any of these claimed experiments, claimed done under claimed conditions, claimed whatever. It's just not there, Pyrrho. They don't even have a videotape of doing the experiment. Then you can't even see a video of scientists doing the experiment in any kind of coherent manner, except for showbiz. I mean, it's 2015. You think you'd have that by now, even. Neutrons have been put through buckyballs and on. Put through what? Again, it's not the two-slit experiment. It's some frickin' manifestation or perversion of it, but it's not the experiment shown or demonstrated. So well, he's just one of the propagandists. Again, this is like a fucking religion. These people are so glued to this idea that they'll just keep selling it as if they've done the work, and they haven't done the work. You haven't proven anything. You just want to ride on a sloppy foundation, because you know if you try to make that foundation any firmer, you're probably going to break it. You're going to crush your own step ladder to heaven, or whatever you're trying to build here. But as soon as you try to test it and make it credible, it's going to break, and you know it. And further, the quantum erasure experiment add a whole host of complex probing to what makes the patterns appear or disappear in terms of detecting the path of the particle. Well, again, you can't detect the path of the particle. Photons do not. There's no way for them to leave trails or for them to do any of this kind of stuff, because that involves some field that has to be disturbed and some transfer of energy. You can't slow a photon down. You can't. Okay? Well, see, Pyrrho thinks that photons actually move slower through glass. So he doesn't even understand that what's really happening is photons are moving more distance. They're either vibrating through the glass, which causes them to move 10 times more distance because they're going up and down as they go forward, or they're being absorbed by electrons who are getting caught in orbits and then being re-emitted. But this guy is too stupid to even understand that as a perfectly sensible explanation for the time dilation that takes place in the movement of light through glass. He already calls the erasure experiments a lie. I'm just saying it's not erasure. And all of these things have nuances to the experiment that can be demonstrated to be the cause of the effect. So we're talking about causes and effects, and you're saying, well, here I'm going to put 15 things in this thing, and then I'm going to pretend none of them are having effects. No, the cause is back here. None of these things caused anything. And I'm saying, no, rationally we can be pretty sure that all these little moving parts that you have frigging around with this thing are probably doing some causing. It happens. It's real. See, he just says it happened. It's real. What's real? You have to understand Men's principal gripe. There are two common representations of the two-slit experiment. One in which states that we can switch on and off a detector that is immediately after the slits, causing the interference pattern to appear and disappear. This one, neither I or Menem can find any details of it being done. As said, Feynman wrote a paper saying any attempt would not be valid because of the significant interference of the thing being measured. Well, and again, but you know, Feynman in his 50s lectures obviously talked about this detector quite a bit, and you know, talked about it as if, not that it was benign, but that it was possible to view electrons, and I still think he was way off to even imply that. Yeah. Well, I have read such experiments. So here we go. This is Pyrrho. For example, there are crystals that you can tell if a photon is going through because of a change in the electrical potential. How exactly is the change in electrical potential accomplished, Pyrrho? How? How does the photon convey its existence to the material and yet not transfer its energy? You're saying that the photon, which has one energy, period, doesn't have a half energy, can't give away a piece of its energy. Okay, you can convert ultraviolet light into infrared light. Sure. You can take the number of photons in a string of photons and change the number or change their distance. So I can take 7 ultraviolet photons crushed close together, and I can convert them into 4 infrared photons and 3 some other kind of photon. But I certainly, how exactly does this crystal magically create its own energy? It not only, it can somehow, it has vision and it can see photons without interfering with them, without absorbing their energy. I mean, what you're saying is not possible if you understand that photons are energy and that nothing, okay, can view them, interact with them without having that energy converted. If you're not going to convert a photon into something, change its direction or change its direction or absorb it or keep it for a while, like a battery. I mean, atoms are just batteries. Atoms just collect electrons. That's what an electron does. I mean, photons. Electrons collect, they're batteries. They just collect photons and then they release them later. But that's all that's taking place here, and you cannot see, there's no mechanism, there's no way you can transfer identity, information, without transferring the energy. Yes, you may consume it and then readmit it, but you cannot passively detect it. You cannot passively detect a photon. It's not possible. All right. This we should be able to agree on. There's no passive detection of a photon. It is impossible to passively detect it. You have to absorb it. You either have to consume some time, force it to move more distance, or you have to change its direction. But you cannot passively interact. If the crystal is in the way but not attached to the detector, you have a pattern. If it's on, the pattern is gone. Well, again, if it's not attached to the detector, if something's not attached, then it's not working, you're saying. Yes. So you can put as many unplugged toasters as you want to in all these experiments, and I don't really give a rat's ass. Pile up as many bricks as you want to, and I don't care. Stand on a mountain lion. I don't care, because it's not really relevant to the experiment then. The eraser experiments go into this more and more elaborately. Yes, and more and more convoluted presumptions are built into the experiment. So many presumptions. Yes, the mirrors are identical. Yes, the mirrors aren't vibrating. Yes, this isn't happening. Yes, no, it's all happening. It's funny that with respect to such experiments being done in Mendham's theory is that the professors at Berkeley that told me about these experiments were lying. Well, they're lying in the sense that they're really bad scientists. Because this is like really important to their science. And apparently they never researched it. They never went to the trouble to find out where this was actually done and actually see a real paper explaining exactly what was done. Because that seems what is quite obvious that's going on is there's a lot of presumption. They talk about it like it happened, so it must have happened. I mean, I've heard Einstein wet his pants at lectures. I mean, did it happen? I could keep saying it forever and ever and ever. People could keep talking, hey, Einstein wet his pants during lectures. People could say it. Is it really true? Does somebody have a picture of it or something? Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. And all reports I've read about the two-slit experiment, which tend to follow, were elaborate hoaxes. It's been done. So you keep saying it. It's been done. Show me. Show me. Show me. Yeah. Show me the one I want to see. Okay, where it was done. I want to see somebody's name on it. I want to see some sort of evidence that this was actually done. So they have the detector and they don't record the results. So it's not that they turn the detector off. They just don't look at the little digital display. So they just put tape over the digital display that indicates what slit it went through. And now the bar pattern comes back. Show me that experiment. Or I'm going to call you a cult member. Okay, you're just part of a cult. Alright, and you're desperate to defend your wacky ideas with canards. There, can I call it a canard? It's a canard. Hofflidated in response. I put it to you that I have not read any first-hand accounts of the experiment. I found lots of accounts that I call basic two-slit experiment. I make no judgment. It may be that it is just difficult to find, but until somebody finds an official paper recounting the experiment and also perhaps its verification, in Mendham's challenge remains. So that is first. Yes. Oh, I mean, Pyrrho answers with first-hand account? Question mark. Yes, a documentation. You haven't heard of documentation? That when you do experiments, you have documentation, authoritative documentation, and then you have like other peer review kind of crap where at least somebody might go and say, let's see if they actually did the experiment. They might find out if they actually have a laboratory and they actually have a device. And so there's some qualification to what is being claimed. I mean, can I really just say I've done something? And then because the results are what you want to hear, you'll just say, yeah, I did it. And everybody will just say, yeah, I did it. Because it's what you want. It's the God you're selling. I mean, aren't we really back to religion? We'll just make up stories of miracles. I saw my Uncle John risen from the dead. And all I have to do is say, hooky pooky dookie. Right? And hold your left foot up. And he was cured from his deafness. There. Is that all? That's science. No, I don't think so. There is a full mathematical explanation as to what pattern to expect when you have different slits widths and slit separation. Yeah. Well, that would be anticipatable, wouldn't it? And it would be anticipatable that at different light frequencies would be affected differently. But the point still remains, what's causing the effect? The matter in the slits and the aperture that the original light went through are the photons. And I'm arguing that you want to find the answer, you'll find it in the vibrations of atoms, not in the mind-reading capacity of photons. Atoms vibrate at consistent, reliable frequencies. Frequencies create waves. Can we get any more? I mean, intuitively, just on an intuitive level, doesn't that sound about right? Atoms are vibrating at a frequency. We know that. That's really beyond argument, right? You would agree that we've established that all atoms are vibrating at a frequency, jiggling, as Feynman would say, and that they have multiple frequencies that they're jiggling at. Frequencies within frequencies, right? And that the bar pattern looks a lot like a harmonic pattern, right? These are the harmonics. Intuitively, yeah, that sounds about right. So you have a filtered pattern representative of waves, and you have atoms making frequency. And your conclusion is, no, that's over there did it. Yeah, I think you're looking in the wrong place. Anyway, you spend a lot of time denying that, but in this case, but it's the case. All right, here we go. Wait, different slit widths and separations, and many variations have been tried, and all of them match the results expected in QED. Well, I'm just saying they don't match the results. Okay, the one done, the last one on the micro tiny particles. No, the one where they actually tried blocking from the outside using a filter from the outside. If you look at the results, it's almost ironically funny, because if you take the two single slit, if you take the single, when one slit is completely blocked and one slit isn't, and you take that pattern and you superimpose it on the one from the other extreme, like when the right slit is completely covered, you have an image, and when the left slit is completely covered, you have an image. And if you take those images and superimpose on themselves, superimpose them on each other, you end up with a final pattern that might be 60 or 70% the two slit final result. So I mean, if something is almost 70 or 80% of what the without any boxes moving thing is, then I'd say it's doing exactly the opposite. It's verifying the fact that there's something fundamentally wrong with your interpretation of this experiment. And clearly, when I point out simple things like, you know, this is not 1/2 the intensity of this, that this is a lot less than 1/2 the intensity of this, and that this clearly has fringes in it, that maybe there's something else going on here. This doesn't look like the thing you'd call absolute proof of something. No, it really doesn't. And the fact that you have fringes on top of fringes, right? Look what you got here. You have fringe, 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 fringe. You have those fringes, and then you have the fringes within the fringes. And then look, you even got these ones going up and down on this experiment. So don't tell me you have proof of something, that it verifies something. Distorter. Okay, you spent a lot of time denying that, but it's the case. You say it's the case. You want to believe it's a poorly tried experiment. No, I'm saying it's a poorly interpreted experiment. All right, yeah, these experiments are poorly done because they don't do what I think are fundamentally necessary things, like first, don't just assume you have a random pattern of light going through the slits. Demonstrate that you have a random pattern of light going through the slits. And they don't even do that. That just seems like basic fact checking. It's all assumptions. Yeah, experiments full of assumptions, I don't think is the way scientists are supposed to behave. Yes, one slit will create diffraction bars. Okay, here we go, because that's what waves do. Oh, here we go. So you have evidence of that? You have evidence of diffraction bars. Okay, interference, empty spaces created by a single wave going through, a water wave going through. It creates empty spaces somewhere on the wall. Oh, that's right, it doesn't. There are also experiments done with larger number of slits which match the predictions of quantum mechanics. Well, again, it doesn't match the predictions of quantum mechanics. What it matches is the fact that if you put a bunch of vibrating strings in the way of something, it doesn't matter whether it's 1 string or 2 strings or 10 strings or 15 strings. The whole 2-slit experiment, what is it really creating? It's creating a single impediment that's much thinner than the bigger side slits. Okay, the side walls, right? So in a way, it's creating a string. And what do we know about strings on guitars or cellos and stuff like that? Well, the fatter the string, the slower the vibrations. Yeah, yeah. So maybe that's what part of this is. And what do we know from Newton's glass? Oh, that's right. That, you know, as you take layers off of glass, no, it's really not, probably not the same. I mean, he did do some thin glass experiments, but I don't know if it really mattered how thin or thick it was. Yeah, I'm just not sure of that, because he layered the thin layers of glass, but, you know, different planes of glass. So I guess that's where it would matter, is when you're doing the multiple. I mean, he did different glass experiments, so this is a little different than the experiment with just polishing glass. This is more about layers of glass and how the reflections on each layer change. But obviously, yes, the thinner you make that impediment in the middle, likely the more it can vibrate at higher frequencies and at more frequencies. But also clearly, like we know with strings, the thinner you make it, the weaker it becomes. So there's an inverse relationship between the strength of the vibration and the blah blah blah. But you know, it seems to me the obvious. What is the two-slit experiment? The two-slit experiment is really about the middle impediment. It's really about creating a thin impediment. It's really the one needle experiment all over again. All right. Okay. So again, these predictions of quantum mechanics. I can't stand this rhetoric. The predictions of quantum mechanics. Show me the formula. Okay, and I'll show you how the formula is just recognizing what Newton discovered. Okay, that there's a proportional relationship, a cycle relationship, that's fundamental to all these mechanisms. Okay, that there's rings to the fucking atom. There's certain. It's like even the bits in a computer. Okay, it's the squaring thing. Okay. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. This is the pattern. That's quantum mechanics. Oh, that's the prediction. Oh, that it follows the same pattern that's fundamental to all these other elements. Duh. The pattern is as you would expect for a wave passing through 3 slits, but also the combination of 3 slits, 2 slits, 1 slit, and 0 slits. Whatever that means. Interference should vanish when accounting for the sign difference according to QM. Interference should vanish when accounting for the sign difference according to QM, which is observed to within 1%. Well, I don't even know what that's saying, but I said another. So I see we can't just deal with one experiment and dissect it. No, we're just going to have to keep slipping to different experiments done different ways and play this idiotic game. Fine. Did they do the single photon at a time thing with this, the multi-slit experiments? Ugh, this is so tedious. All right, I googled it for you. Yeah, so this is the atom thing. Well, you didn't Google anything, jackass. You googled pseudoscience pages. But I mean, this is researchers. This is what he gives me. Researchers have sent molecules containing 58 or 140 through a so-called double slit. Yeah, through a so-called double slit experiment of unknown character, of unknown shape, function. I mean, clearly atoms are much bigger than photons, so we'd have to assume that there was some accounting for that in the size of the slits. They'd have to be proportionally bigger. All kinds of things like that. The atoms apparently aren't even consistently shaped, which is, I would think, would indicate a problem using things that change their shape based on velocity. And yeah, again, you're shooting them at what? Any consistent velocity? How can you know what velocity you're shooting them even at? You know. So, but anyway, I'm just saying, what's the point? The experiment has been done with atoms. Has been. So, yeah, he's just, not the way the guy described it. Was it done the way the guy described it? Was that the way the experiment was done? In the detector, and then it was unplugged? Was any of that done? The detector, he didn't even describe about exactly how it did this detecting. I'm just saying his description of the, was false in the sense he was just using atoms as if they were photons, and they're not photons. And if you're going to do the experiment with atoms, it's going to be a little more complicated than that. Whatever this is. Yeah, quantum field theory is crap. Actually, yes, the claim is there are underlying fields where waves propagate. Yeah, okay, so you've just turned space into a medium, not unlike Einstein, and just denied the fact that we don't really need the medium if you account for the fact that the photons actually do exist. The photons are the medium. The fact that blah blah isn't mentioned in popularized talk given in a complete layman says nothing about how physicists actually explain or even describe the phenomena. Yeah, well, obviously physicists don't agree, so this crap that you've got some sort of proof of something is just absolute crap. Physicists don't agree. Okay, there's only a third of them even doing the Copenhagen thing, jerk. There are two slits because you don't see interference pattern. What? There are two slits because you don't see interference pattern. Well, that doesn't make any sense. However you wish to call them with one slit. Well, again, I'm just pointed out, I just showed you an image. Okay, the interference pattern is in the one slit. And with more slits you see more complex patterns. If you can give an explanation predicting what the pattern will be in your theory, then you're onto something. No, I don't care what the pattern can be. I'm saying what's the source of the pattern, you jackass? Alright? I'm not arguing with the existence of the pattern. I'm not arguing that the pattern has a mathematical consistency. I'm arguing that it's being caused by the fucking atoms. Not by mind-reading photons. The photons don't carry any of this information. They aren't riding on waves that go through both slits. No, that they're affected by matter. That when they come in close proximity to matter and electrons, okay, that they are affected in how they travel. Their direction is influenced by association with electrons. That's what I'm arguing. They're not actually going through the slits. They're interfering with the slits. That's why the slits are there, to interfere with them. God, you people are dumb fuckers. And with more slits, you see more complex patterns. Yeah, and who's arguing that? No, not me. If you can give an explanation, blah, 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 blah. QM can do that. Just assume QF waves, and you can do just that. The wave model fits the data. Yeah, the wave model is crap. There's no need to create a wave model. It's not reflective of reality, and it's full of made-up attachments and associations that you're making up. So I'm just saying you're creating a false model. You're proud of that? Fine. I think it's false, fake. Your explanation is not even an explanation. I'm saying I can probably give you a pretty clear model of how actual things are influencing actual things, and that explains something. We can understand pool balls hitting each other. Pool balls reading the other pool ball's mind and deciding to go south for the winter. No, that doesn't happen. The pool balls do hit each other. They do interact. It's real shit that happens in the universe. It isn't any of this fake field crap. There is no magical attraction and repulsion. Things are pushed and pulled. That's the way it really works. Everything's physically connected to something, and that's how it physically gets moved. Except for photons, which just are like, photons are the energy. They're the original thing. They're just in a perpetual state of, I'm going that way. Or that way, or that way, or that way, or that way. But I'm going. That's all. They're just going. And they never stop, and they're the source of all movement in the universe. There are particle kinds. The experiment has been done with single electrons, other single particles, even molecules. Well, single electrons, again, what is an electron? How do you exactly just throw an electron across the room? You want me to show me how you shoot an electron across the room? And how the electron gets to the other side without banging into all kinds of shit before it gets there? Electrons aren't photons. Electrons just don't fly through air with a no, hey, we didn't hit anything. No, they hit shit. Alright, anyway. Oh, this guy was such an asshole, this empirical shit fuck brain. Fucking arrogant physicist using experiments to gain knowledge about nature? Yeah, I'm all for using experiments, but again, experiments they don't even detail. Experiments they're not willing to publish for free. So what the fuck is that? But yeah, clearly, over 100, almost 150-year-old experiments that they don't seem willing to dissect completely and thoroughly. Don't they know they can just make shit up? Well, that's all I'm saying is this guy made the shit up, right? Are you saying that any of the shit he was saying in that video happened? The detector, the unplugging, all that crap? That you saying it happened? No, none of that shit happened. Sitting in your living room and wondering about the woods. Yeah, well, again, I brought up the fact that Einstein was sitting in a patent office, and apparently he could do some pretty smart stuff. If you fuck with physics community, you are fucking with the best. We, I love this, we actually check our claims. So I did make a joke out of the we thing. We, LOL. I never use LOL. So that's only like the third time in my entire internet career that I've used the term LOL. But, I mean, I did say, oh, I just did a laughing out loud. We, this guy. Yeah, right. What's your degree in farting? Atomic farting. Alright, so using experiments, I say fake experiments, and they substantially are. Sitting in your living room are a patent. Yeah, so I said that. And so then I asked this guy, why are you such a fucking petty motherfucking cunt? Yeah. So here's Pyrrho again. Alright, here's Physics World. Okay, well, we'll definitely go. Well, that's the carbon one. Okay, let's see how much of it they demonstrate, they document. It's ludicrous that you call these fake experiments, but you have no actual experiments to counter them with. You are doing entirely thought experiments and denying a lot of facts and evidence when you do so. Yeah, what? I don't have a laboratory, and apparently every physics laboratory is completely focused on one thing. Like, let's try to contrive validation of quantum mechanics. None of them seem at all interested in doing any kind of the experiments I would do. So yeah, if I had the money, you don't think I'd be doing the experiments? I mean, if I had an extra $1 million sitting around, you don't think I'd be doing this shit? I'd love to do these fucking experiments because I think the answers are there. I don't think you have to do that much to figure out where the flaws in their experiments are. Like I said, the first thing I want them to do is show the light pattern before it even gets to the two slits, because I'm going to argue that that light pattern is not randomized, that it's going to have Newton's rings in it. Pyrrho, I saw you're 60 and raised you 140 atom molecules. Well, whatever. Okay, so I didn't call these fake experiments. So let's be clear on that. What I said was this guy's explanation of the two-slit experiment was bogus. It wasn't an accurate description of the experiment. That's what I said, and I stand by it. So anyway, that's probably enough. So we'll, no doubt, continuing. But really, I'm not arguing with the math of quantum mechanics, because I think the math, if you really dissect the math, it's just math recognizing this squaring idea, where you know, 4, 8, 16, 32, that there's peaks, there's slots that energy falls into, and that these slots are part of their physical structure and the physical structure of atoms, and this is how the behavior is manifest. So yeah, I'm not arguing with that. I'm saying photons don't do any of this shit. Photons aren't riding on waves. Photons aren't doing any of that shit. Photons interact with electrons, and electrons are usually tied to atoms. And it is it is the complex function of atoms, not function but disposition of an atom. An atom is in a complex state. It has vibrations running through it from everything hitting it. Every photon that hits me, it's vibrating my matter. It's vibrating my chemistry. Every bit of it has to get changed based on the photons absorbed. So even in the two slit experiment, all those photons that don't go through the two slits, that actually hit the material, they go into that material, and if that energy isn't readmitted as infrared radiation or some other heat, that energy stays inside of that thing and bounces around inside of that surface theoretically forever. It's entered a frictionless environment. So you don't understand that you're throwing kinetic energy, pool balls, into the atmosphere of the atoms, and that the atoms are affected by that energy. That's the complexity. That's the source of the filter. That's what I'm arguing. All right, until next time.